And so, in the middle of winter, they first decided to do this. The first brother stayed on watch with his sister, and the night passed. And as it is in winter, particularly, the embers of the fire were just burning along, and although he stayed trying to read his book, he nodded off, and he was in that half awake, half asleep place when suddenly he heard on the window tap, tap, tap. And like all of us do, when we hear such a thing, we think to ourselves, well, it's nothing. Oh, it wasn't there, it's just... So he just ignored it, and as he nodded off to sleep again, it came. Tap, tap, tap. Well, he thought, there's a simple explanation for this. It's winter, it's windy, there are trees banging against the windows. This is nothing for me to concern myself with. So he ignored it. Tap, tap, tap. He looked at his watch, and there was the time. It was about 20 to 3 in the morning. Tap, tap, tap. So he went to the windows where the curtains were drawn, and he took the curtains and slowly drew them back, and there, staring, were 2 bright yellow eyes. Well, you all know what to do when there's something scary. You all know instinctively what protects you from ghosts and ghoulies and bogeymen and all manner of monsters. What do you do, Kate?
Hide under the bed.
You hide under the bed. We all know that when something nasty and horrible is there, that the thing that will protect you from guns and knives and claws and teeth and fangs is a thin sheet of cotton material. And he knew this too, so he closed the windows. And that was it. But the next morning he told his brother, and he thought, well, we can't really ignore this, we've got to know what's going on. And so the next night they both decided that they were going to do it together. And so they sat there by the fireplace with the books, reading, as Hannah slept through another fitful night. The first snows of winter were falling on the ground. And then, as they stayed there, they heard the noise. Tap, tap, tap. Now it was clear, but it couldn't be the trees on the window, because they had one of these big houses, and if ever you've seen the programmes like Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice, when they have those big houses, if you have a big posh house, you don't cover the front of it with trees, you want everyone to see it. So they knew it wasn't the trees. And so one of the brother stood there with his gun, and the other brother, who had a poker from the fire, went to the curtains and very slowly went to them. Tap, tap, tap. Carefully he opened up the curtains, and there were 2 bright yellow eyes. BANG! The brother with the gun shot those 2 yellow eyes, which fell away from the building into the darkness. Quickly the brothers ran down the stairs, and there, in the fresh snow, running away from the house, was a single set of footprints with a trail of blood. The brothers set off, chasing, following these footprints over the field, down the lane, through the gate, over the stiles, into another field, along and along and along, and eventually they came to the old churchyard. There, through the churchyard, the single set of footprints and the trail of blood continued up until one of the vaults. And there, one of the vaults was open. The brothers looked inside, and there on one of the slabs lay the body of the creature. Carefully, one of the brothers, the brother with the gun, stood and guarded the body while the other brother ran to the local priest, who came over and with a stake and a hammer nailed through the heart of the vampire. The vampire turned, passing on his curse to the brother with the gun. They took the body out, they took it into the yard of a church where they burnt it. And to this day, over 100 years later, that bare patch of earth in the yard is still there. Nothing will grow where the body of the vampire was burnt. Now, that's the story. Some of that may be true, some of it may not. Croglin exists. The church in Croglin exists. You can find buildings and houses that could have been what we have referred to as Croglin Hall, but that could have all been made up. However, there is one fact about this story which is true, and this is the one that can upset people. To this day, in the pub opposite the church is a newspaper article. The name of the pub is the Robin Hood. And if you go into there, you will see on the wall this newspaper article telling the story of the Croglin vampire. And some years later, a certain man was sat in that pub reading the story. A few years later, he went on to write one of the most famous stories in the world. The man's name was Bram Stoker. And so the story he wrote, Dracula, was a story that was inspired, at least in part, if not majorly, by a story from Cumbria. And if you live in Whitby and you think the vampire story comes from there, or Transylvania and you think the story comes from there, then you could be right. But actually, the biggest influence on Bram Stoker was the Croglin vampire.
So what have we found out from tonight's episode? Well, there are simple people that believe in the story. There's the forensic evidence that was found in the woods. There is the story that unites people from all over the world. So may you always find the truth, no matter where it takes you. Until next time, good night.